Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unrolling the map to unravel the incredibly complex, decades-long friction between two of the world's oldest civilizations and nuclear-armed neighbors, India and China. We're going to look way beyond the daily headlines and really explore the deep strategic shifts that have totally defined this relationship over the last 60 years. It's a fascinating story of conflict, calculation, and fundamentally changing military postures.
Okay, let's dive into this. We are tracing a massive paradigm shift today. We'll be going from the crushing defeat of 1962 through the huge strategic transformation that followed, right up to the intense modern competition we're seeing right now.
So, to kick things off, I want to pose this pivotal question directly to you. How exactly did a crushing defeat reshape future responses? Because the 1962 Himalayan blunder wasn't just a loss, it was really a harsh crucible for an awakening. It proved pretty quickly that naive diplomacy without actual military backing was a fatal combination. Let's see how that harsh realization completely rewrote the playbook.
To truly understand where we are today, we have to track this timeline, and it's a volatile one. Back in the 1950s, things were actually incredibly cordial. It was the era of Hindi Chini bye-bye, the idea that Indians and Chinese are brothers. But that warmth rapidly deteriorated into the 1962 conflict. And unfortunately, that was just the start of decades of persistent border friction. We're talking violent clashes at Nathu in 1967, tensions at Sumdrong-Chu in 87, that huge Doklam standoff in 2017, all the way to the deadly Galwan Valley clash in 2020.
Now, what's really interesting here is how fast the dynamic shifted after 62. Just 5 years later, in 1967 at Nathu, Chinese forces opened heavy fire on Indian troops. But under the leadership of Major General Saugat Singh, the Indian Army's response was, well, completely different this time. They retaliated fiercely. Artillery observation posts opened up a devastating barrage of pinpoint fire. The result? Chinese forces suffered around 340 dead and over 450 wounded. This was an absolutely crucial test of India's post-1962 defense preparations. It proved that heavy firepower and firm resolve could in fact counter aggression.
And that growing resolve only hardened as time went on. Take 1987 at Sumdrong-Chu. When Chinese forces intruded, the Indian Army reacted swiftly, surrounding them and moving sizable forces into the area. Then, fast forward to 2017 in Doklam. We saw a highly proactive stance against provocative Chinese road building. These weren't just isolated incidents. They demonstrated a seriously evolving military maturity. It was basically a loud and clear message: any unilateral attempt to change the status quo is going to be met with formidable resistance.
Let's move along and see how this physical resolve translated into the broader strategy of border management. Recognizing that they needed peaceful borders for economic growth, both nations really did try diplomacy. They signed major agreements in 1993, followed by military confidence-building measures in 1996 and 2005. And for a while, it kind of worked. But then that entire architecture of trust was essentially thrown out the window in 2020 during the attempt to unilaterally change the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh. That violation triggered a total reset. It was a stark reminder that agreements on paper mean absolutely nothing without physical deterrence on the ground.
To put that deterrence into perspective, just look at the stark contrast between the India of 1962 and 2020. In 62, the vulnerabilities were just glaring. We're talking poor infrastructure and massive intelligence failures. I mean, India literally missed the Chinese construction of a crucial highway in the late 1950s until it was practically finished. No way that happens today. By 2020, you've got robust infrastructure like the 255-kilometer Darbuk-Shoyak DBO road providing critical connectivity. You have rapid deployment capabilities like specialized quick reaction boats patrolling the high-altitude lakes. The difference in physical preparedness is night and day.
Now, looking closely at this history reveals a really fascinating parallel in domestic politics. Look at Mao in 1962 and Xi Jinping in 2020. In 62, Mao's Great Leap Forward was a catastrophic failure that caused widespread famine. To regain legitimacy, he desperately needed an external enemy, and he found one in India. In 2020, Xi Jinping is facing dipping economic growth, the massive fallout from the early COVID-19 pandemic, and intense protests in Hong Kong. Once again, an external conflict at the border served as a potent tool to unify the population back home. Geopolitics, as we see here, is so often driven by internal crises.
So, what does this all mean for the future? The crucial point is that modern competition is no longer confined to high-altitude physical borders, not even close. The rivalry has expanded into a massive, multi-domain warfare landscape. It's like a giant puzzle where you have to build capacity in both kinetic and non-kinetic arenas. You're countering threats not just with troops on a freezing mountain, but by securing sea lines of communication, protecting vital information networks, and building robust economic and technological firewalls.
And how does a nation actually respond to a multi-domain challenge like that? It comes down to three main pillars: capability, partnerships, and self-reliance. For capability, look at the 9.02-kilometer Audal Tunnel, the longest highway tunnel in the world, ensuring year-round military connectivity, which definitely makes China uncomfortable. For partnerships, it's about strengthening alliances like the Quad to keep the Indo-Pacific free and open. And self-reliance? Well, when you depend on your strategic rival for 70% of the active pharmaceutical ingredients used in your own drug manufacturing, that is a glaring vulnerability. Fixing those massive economic dependencies is just as critical as building mountain bridges.
Which brings us right to the diplomatic front. Listen to this absolutely powerful quote from the late External Affairs Minister, Sushma Swaraj. She said, "If China expects India to adhere to one China policy, then China must respect the one India policy." It perfectly crystallizes the modern diplomatic demand. Reciprocity is non-negotiable. Respect for sovereignty simply cannot be a one-way street.
As we wrap up today's explainer, if there's one core takeaway you remember from the 6 decades of history we've mapped out, it has to be this: agreements and goodwill alone do not secure borders. As we've seen from Nathu to Galwan, peace survives when diplomacy is supported by strength. Going from the glaring vulnerabilities of 1962 to the prepared resolve of today proves that capability is the ultimate deterrent. But with both nations rapidly modernizing right now, we have to ask ourselves, will this multi-domain deterrence hold the line, or are we just witnessing the preparation for an even larger paradigm shift in the Himalayas? Thanks so much for joining me today, and we'll see you in the next explainer.